gather round, we've got a story to share. Richie and John, they always care. Championing voices fierce and strong. Tune in, turn up, you can't go wrong. Life and love, they're here to fight. It's Newsday Tuesday, let's take a stand. With Richie and John, let's shake the land. Voices of truth in every sound. In this podcast world, our hope is found.
The Mutual Broadcasting System presents Richie and John, the podcast that connects you with the people, events, headlines, and lifestyle interests of the global LGBTQ+ community. Here's Richie Roy and John McMullen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Richie and John. It is Newsday Tuesday, and I always try to start the show with a smile in my voice, just because I think that people like to hear someone with a little bit of a happy sort of tone. But it's not been a happy week. It's actually been kind of a lot. We've got a lot of stories for you, obviously related to our community, and it's really the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more stories. And we're not going to talk about things like tariffs and potential land wars in Panama or South Africa. We're not going to talk about the invasion of the Office of Personnel and Management or the OMB memo freezing funding for federal grants or Elon Musk and his coterie of literal high school students taking control of the U.S. Treasury's databases. We're not going to talk about any of that, but you should read up on it. It's not good. But we have a lot of stories for you about our community. And I'm here, of course, with my wonderful co-host, John McMullen. Hello, John.
Hello, Richie. I'm glad to hear all those things we're not going to talk about are not going to be talked about, at least on this episode.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'd be here for probably about 10 hours at least.
Yeah. Or 3 weeks.
Yeah, something like that. But we've got some stories for you. Some good, some bad, a mix. We try to leaven things as much as we can because, it's not all doom and gloom. There are some moments of heroism and some moments of courage and some great things, even if they're not happening here, maybe across the pond, maybe far away. And we will get to some of those, including our first story, which is a story of courage. In a significant move, Twin Cities Pride has ended its sponsorship with Target in a decision driven by the retailer's recent rollback on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Target is based in Minneapolis, and it announced plans to withdraw from initiatives that foster diversity and that it would stop participating in surveys like the HRC's Corporate Equality Index. We've talked about this a lot with Robbie Starbuck. Now, Robbie Starbuck, he'll probably end up being the undersecretary of Health and Human Services or something at this point. But for now, his crusade has now taken root in the federal government itself. And
I'm surprised, actually, Richie, that he hasn't been named as the Secretary of the Department of Commerce.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. So Twin Cities Pride made this decision to forego Target's $50,000 sponsorship, which is traditionally their sponsorship of Pride. Executive Director Andy Otto said the move stunned the community, their move to get rid of DEI. Under the backdrop of recent political challenges, Target has been a key supporter for 18 years. And this leaves a funding gap that the Pride must now bridge through community support and new sponsors. Otto remains hopeful about future reconciliation, but insists on prioritizing community values. Target, meanwhile, has not publicly commented on the matter as of yet. I think they're just hoping that people will just kind of let it slide. Maybe there's too much news. We'll just kind of forget. But, I think this is a big move and is a show of solidarity and a show of courage. And to the extent, if you happen to be someone who is in the Twin Cities area, consider ponying up a little bit to fill that gap. But if not, maybe even just reach out to them and say that you are happy that they did this, and maybe reach out to Target and just say, we thought you were our friend, because I know that there's been a lot of coverage in the news and a lot of social media from especially actually people of color, especially Black business owners, because for many years, Target has actually been really, really good for Black-owned business, small businesses, and has done great work to bring small Black-owned business into their stores nationwide. And they have just done a 180 and just have said, we literally don't care anymore. So
can I make one recommendation?
Yeah.
If you have one of those so-called red cards, the credit card from Target, my recommendation would be to cut it into 4 pieces, put it in an envelope with a image that is printed out of a middle finger, like this, and return it to them and just sign it DEI.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing that gets their attention like losing a consumer that they're making ongoing profit off of from interest rates.
And especially when I think about like a Target, because at the end of the day, there's Target and there's Walmart. I've always thought of them as kind of a little bit. I mean, obviously Walmart is, they do a lot of other things. They do, groceries and stuff.
Well, so does Target.
But so does Target. I think of them as always having been kind of like twin sisters or something, and Walmart being kind of the evil one and Target being kind of the one on the side of good. And it's always been like, oh, if you have a choice, in your town, go to the Target. They support Pride initiatives. They support Black-owned business. Go to the Target. It's a better place. It's a better shopping experience. Go for it. But now, fuck them. Like, really?
I'm not surprised, honestly. I have to tell you, I mean, it's based in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And frankly, I'm sorry if there's nice people that I have not met from Minneapolis, St. Paul. I personally believe that the only people I would ever want to meet from Minneapolis are like Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda Morgenstern. Because everybody else that I have met in the LGBTQ community from there has been off their rocker. I mean, weird. Like there's something in the water there.
Interesting. But yeah, so we'll start out by saying that is a show of pride and a show of courage in a moment, that we are seeing a lot of this DEI, this anti-DEI initiative is metastatizing, that word is hard to say, because of this federal government. And they are weaponizing things like federal grants. They're weaponizing the DOJ and the DOE and everyone that they can against what they call gender ideology, which is to say anything that is not biological male female sex at birth. So they are, this current government is extremely anti-trans. And further, we've seen things like the Department of Transportation said that they are canceling all celebrations of, what was it? It was something like characteristics that are immutable or are politically based. What that means is they are canceling Black History Month and Pride is what it actually means. So we are seeing this onslaught of anti-DEI, and what DEI basically means is people who aren't straight white men, because
I'd like to cancel oxygen consumption for those people.
Right. So, so anyway, we're seeing a lot of this, and Target is one of probably many companies to cave. We're just going to have to keep an eye on them and keep an eye on the companies that aren't doing it. And again, Costco, we've talked about, fended off a shareholder initiative to ditch DEI. But they have been the target of many state AGs since then, saying that they will investigate Costco for their DEI initiatives. So we also have to really support people who are with us. So support Costco.
Let me give you a quick rundown, because I have a list of some of them. Somebody was very kind enough to post this in social media yesterday. But some of the companies scaling back or denouncing DEI are Amazon, Boeing, Brown-Forman, Caterpillar, Ford, Harley-Davidson, Home Depot, John Deere, Lowe's, Molson Coors, Meta, which is Facebook, of course, McDonald's, Nissan, Stanley Black & Decker, Target, Toyota, Tractor Supply, and Walmart. Those who, at least at this point, are reinforcing their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion include American Airlines, Apple, Bank of America, Catholic Health, that surprised me, Costco, Delta, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Marriott, Microsoft, Procter & Gamble, Southwest Airlines, and United Airlines.
Yeah, it's important to keep track of this. I know that there is a Twitter page, Mueller She Wrote, who I believe has an ongoing page that lists many of the sites that John just mentioned, or many of the companies. and most of which we've talked about on this show. We've got to keep your eye on it because, just recently I heard from a friend, because this didn't even make sort of the news. Aldi has removed DEI from its careers page. It is quietly happening in other places too. So keep your eye on it. But in the meantime, I'm glad that Twin Cities Pride stood up to Target.
As I read a number of the responses in social media channels where people are talking about DEI, many of the respondents being, of course, pro-Trump, anti-DEI, and showing their real ignorance. It's amazing to me how many people think that DEI is simply about the issues of hiring practice, where it's an affirmative action matter, and it relates specifically to people being hired simply because of the color of their skin or where they're from or, that kind of thing. And that is not the case. DEI is so much more expansive than just those characteristics.
I have to go back to the words themselves because they use DEI. They just say DEI. Before that, they said woke. They said woke 2 years ago. And what they mean is people of color. And when they say DEI, they mean people of color, they mean trans people, they mean gay people, and they actually also mean women, truth be told. The words themselves, diversity, equity, and inclusion, these are literally good things. They spit out DEI. Okay, well, diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with those values?
Well, what they're thinking is that it's all about not hiring people based on their skills and ability levels, when in fact there are a lot of people who fall into those categories who are very skilled, have experience, are qualified to do those jobs, but are oftentimes not getting the opportunity because businesses are not colorblind.
Exactly. Right. I mean, that's exactly right. And, we saw an example of this with the air crash in DC.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that later in the show. But, the immediate response from this feckless, hateful government was to blame the crash on DEI, literally saying it's probably because there might have been a black person in the control tower or in the cockpit.
Yeah.
That is literally before they didn't know anything. That's just where they jumped to.
I really want to jump right now to that story too, especially about that specific situation, but I'm not going to because it's really something I think we're going to get to sink our teeth into. And I am hoping that people will hang out long enough to get with us through that part of the conversation because I'm hoping we're going to set your skin on fire. That's what I'm hoping. Because it certainly did mine when I first read about this. I was fit to be tied.
Yeah, but we'll get there. So in the meantime, we're going to talk about the federal government again, and specifically a very important part of the federal government, which is the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice is famously has really tried, I believe, is the goal is to be apolitical, to be straightforward, to do what is right by the law. Unfortunately, our current DOJ is nothing like that. It's actually the opposite. It's actually being weaponized by the president to be a sort of, a tool to intimidate and harass people. And what that has led to is the disbanding of DOJ Pride. After 3 decades, DOJ Pride has ceased operations, citing the need to protect its members. The LGBTQ plus employee resource group at the DOJ made the announcement this week, emphasizing the challenging political climate under the Trump administration. A message from the group's board expressed hopes to rebuild someday, but noted that the decision was essential for member safety. The move follows recent federal directives to eliminate DEI initiatives, alongside orders to remove, quote, gender ideology from government workplaces. In response, a DOJ spokesperson affirmed the administration's commitment to freedom of association. It clarified that resource groups aren't targeted by the, quote, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing order.
What a load of horse crap.
Yeah. I mean, that is the most Pravda shit, Despite this, DOJ Pride isn't alone. Other groups like the DOJ's Gender Equality Network have also disbanded. Many employees fear a regression to eras when being out was professionally perilous. Further illustrating the deep impact of current policies, I've seen articles where there are folks at the DOJ who say, given the current climate, they wish that they had never been out at work, because where they're at now, they feel like they are in the crosshairs of the administration and that their jobs are in jeopardy for being. So it's pretty intense. And, John, hearing that, what kind of goes through your mind hearing that the DOJ, which is not a group of shrinking violets, these are strong career lawyers and investigators, and
many of whom, by the way, are self-described conservatives, but not of the MAGA style.
Right.
They would dearly like to go back to the days of Bush administrations or other previous Republican administrations that have some sort of value where the rule of law is concerned.
Right. And the thing that brings to mind is, like, when I think about the DOJ, again, I think about sort of independence and strength. And, of course, the DOJ is not perfect. And also, it's a prosecutorial branch. And so, there's definitely been issues in the past, if you think about things like, prosecution for, disparate prosecution for federal drug crimes. The DOJ has not been great, in the past, in terms of prosecuting people of color versus white people for federal drug crimes. The DOJ is not perfect, but the DOJ has generally tried to be an arm of the government that is sort of above the fray.
Yeah.
I saw something today that made my head explode. And this is not exactly on our topic of LGBTQ, but it just kind of gives you a flavor of where the DOJ is at, given this is why the Pride group has disbanded. This letter today came from the U.S. Attorney, Edward R. Martin, out of the District of Columbia. And what he said was that, and to give a little context, Elon Musk has this fake government agency called the Department of Government Efficiency, DOJ, which is basically ruining the government. And there was some reporting as to who was working with Elon Musk on this. And there were about 6 names. And there were some tweets that tweeted out, these are the people working with Elon Musk to destroy our government. And you can look them up, and many of them are literally straight out of high school. Like, not a joke. They're kids. They are teenagers straight out of high school who were interns at Neuralink or SpaceX, who are now on Elon Musk's crack team, setting up servers at the Office of Personnel and Management, at Treasury. They're setting up servers in conference rooms that are unsecured. It is a rogue coup by Elon Musk. And so there was a tweet that named some of these people and said, hey, these are the people who are currently kind of taking over your government. An email or a letter went out from the U.S. DOJ, the U.S. Attorney, Edward R. Martin from District of Columbia, to Elon Musk, sent via Twitter, no less, but posted. And it said, Dear Elon, it was good to work with the DOJ team this weekend. We must keep all our American government employees safe, and we must protect the American people's property. Anyone imperiling others violating our laws. I recognize that some of the staff at DOJ has been targeted publicly. At this time, I ask that you utilize me and my staff to assist in protecting the DOJ work and the DOJ workers. Any threats, confrontations, or other actions in any way that impact their work may break numerous laws. Let me assure you of this. We will pursue any and all legal action against anyone who impedes your work or threatens your people. We will not act like the previous administration who looked the other way as the Antifa and BLM rioters, as well as thugs with guns, trashed our capital city. We will protect DOJ and the other workers no matter what. One last warning for you. Late last week, we indicted an economist who worked at the Fed for economic espionage for the communist Chinese, capital C and C. Please be very aware that there are those who are acting against our American people in every way. Refer to us any questionable conduct or details that you find or notice. DOJ is not a government agency. These are literally random rogue people working with Elon Musk with no authority and no clearances getting
That's why I
access.
told you before, it's not Doge, it's DOGE, doggy.
Doggy,
So
yeah.
bend over and take it like a doggy.
But so this is where the DOJ is right now, literally saying things like Antifa and BLM and the communist Chinese capital C. That is literally, like, no joke. That is the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. So it makes perfect sense that the Pride group at DOJ is going to be like, we're going to kind of hide right now, because that's insane.
I don't even know what to say.
I know it feels fake. It's hard to believe. It's really hard to believe that someone in charge of the DOJ's DC office would send a letter so crazy protecting a non-governmental group of thugs and threatening that anyone who
have no authority.
And threatening anyone who even speaks ill of them with investigation and potential prosecution for crimes which aren't crimes, because how can it be a crime to literally bring light to a bunch of people who are actively committing crimes? Accessing classified information, for instance, the social security numbers and birthdays and identities of people who work in agencies across the federal government when you have no clearance and you have no authority and you're in high school? Give me a fucking break. Anyway, sorry for the little aside there. I know that I took us on a little bit of a detour, but that really stuck with me today. And was just sort of to me a sign of the sort of breathtaking speed with which a lot of arms of our federal government have been politicized and really turned into sort of Trumpian cesspools.
Yeah. Any of the dumb motherfuckers who didn't heed our warnings about Project 2025 and all of its related nonsense, they may as well just put a bullet in their head, because they're stupid. They're beyond stupid.
They told us what they were going to do, and they're doing it.
I know it's been hard to take Trump at his word in the past, because he's a prolific liar, probably the most prolific liar on the planet Earth and in the history of mankind. But still, when it comes to this kind of nonsense, I had no reason to suspect that he was not telling the truth.
The thing is, he lied. He did lie. He said he didn't know anything about Project 2025.
Oh, yeah. Well,
so he did lie about that.
Yeah, he did lie.
And the thing is, he is a liar.
Yeah.
But the people who are not liars are the people who he installs, the people who surround him. And they've never been liars. The Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, all of those people have never lied. They have always been very clear about their plans.
Yeah.
And Project 2025 was just them saying, if we get in power, here's what we will do. And
here's what's going to happen. While they're in power, we're going to end up, I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, we're going to end up with a whole lot more Luigis. And I don't believe that that is the way that we resolve our problems in this country. But I think that that is the way that a lot of people are going to resort to resolving problems that are of the making of the MAGA nonsense again. I
mean, it remains to be seen. I think people are going to get really frustrated. I think you're right. And I think that includes people who even voted for Trump, because the misery is not, people are surprised, and they're actually, you see articles. They thought that it would just be miserable for Black people and trans people. And when it comes for them, when it comes for their economy and it comes for their families, when it comes to white women who are getting fired from the federal government for being DEI hires, they're surprised and they're not happy about it. Yeah. And when you have a party that is non-responsive to their constituencies, you're right. People at some point are going to will resort to something.
Yeah.
So
let's move along here, because in a significant move last week, the Trump administration initiated an investigation into Denver public schools over the conversion of a girls' restroom into an all-gender facility. And while the nearby boys' restroom remained unchanged. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, led by Acting Assistant Secretary Craig Traynor, cited potential civil rights violations against female students, claiming a lack of comparable restroom facilities. Traynor declared, under President Trump, we will not tolerate discrimination, at least as he directed a full investigation demanding data and personnel access from the district. And the investigation aligns with President Trump's broader efforts to dismantle LGBTQ plus inclusive policies, utilizing governmental tools previously employed by the Biden administration for inclusivity. Denver Public Schools responded, emphasizing student-led inclusivity efforts. Meanwhile, the department further stirred controversy, announcing the cessation of federal opposition to school book banning efforts targeting LGBTQ plus content. Framed under parental rights, the action underscores a shift toward conservative educational policies, posing significant implications for queer and minority communities.
So we talked about this a little bit ago, which was we were like, why can't all bathrooms just be all gender bathrooms? You know, right. I talked about the one at the Whole Foods. You know, it's just a bunch of stalls and then a bunch of sinks, and everyone goes in the same one and uses the same thing. That is not good enough for this. This administration wants there to be a bathroom for penises and a bathroom for vaginas and nothing else. Like a private all gender bathroom, an all gender bathroom. No, they want to make sure that folks who are trans or folks who are non-binary or intersex don't even have a place to fucking pee. They're that busy with that. I mean, you know, like setting aside the land wars in Canada and Panama and Mexico, they're literally focused on, again, Meta taking tampons out of the bathroom. And now one school in Denver that converted one bathroom to an all-gender bathroom. All gender. Everyone can go in it. That is too far for them, and they're literally demanding names and personnel records.
You know, I think what these brave people who are trans should do is they should show up on their nearest MAGA Republican's doorstep and just take a shit right there. Come on, people. This is just a human functioning thing. Fucking mind your own fucking business.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
how would we come to realize that that was such a key declaration during the political convention season this past summer, when Tim Walz told the American people that what they really need to do is learn how to mind their own business?
At the end of the day, it's not that surprising, because I would say that some of these people who are thinking these thoughts probably still think there should be separate water fountains. We have both come far in a lot of ways, but in some ways we have not moved an inch. I think I might have mentioned it before, but I reread it today, and it was really an important article. It's New York Magazine has this article, The Cruel Kids Table, and it's really important reading. New York Magazine's actually great. If you don't subscribe to it, it's actually really good. They're doing good journalism. They're following very closely this administration, but it's an article about young conservatives, and their sort of gleeful cruelty and excitement to be a part of what is happening right now.
By the way, I want to take a moment right here to plug some social media for us so that people can stay attuned to things that we're looking at, talking about, and all that. We have a Blue Sky account for the show now. And while we still have some Meta accounts and we've abandoned the X account for the show, I am going to try and drive most people, because Blue Sky seems to understand the toxic nature of all these other services. I really would like to drive people, as many as possible, to follow us at Richie and John, with it all spelled out, kind of like our website is, .bsky.social. And that is where you'll be able to find things if we put stuff up that we link to. I want to add a link to New York Magazine and to the article that Richie just talked about a moment ago, and other things like that. That is the place to always kind of stay aware of what we're thinking and talking about. There are other places too, But I'm really kind of personally sick to my stomach of promoting those places, even though it's necessary for us to still have some level of existence within them. And I don't know, I'm so sick to my stomach right now. I just almost want to stop doing this episode, but we do have some of the stuff we've got to get onto. And one of those things is the fact that our government has now scrubbed a bunch of the websites that we, the taxpayers, paid for information to be there for all of our good.
Yeah, it's true. So in a sweeping move following executive order from President Trump, numerous government websites, most government websites actually, have been purged, removing references to gender ideology, diversity, and inclusion. As of last Friday, health agencies, including the CDC, complied by taking down web pages relating to LGBTQ identities, contraception, HIV data. Officials revealed that phrases like, quote, pregnant people and, quote, health equity were scheduled for removal. This includes web pages on things like how to prevent HIV transmission, on things like resources for pregnant women. This includes things like pages on the VA for transgender veterans to receive care, all kinds of things. And many sites are kind of either broken at this moment or half working. This also includes research, like sort of published articles that were on the CDC and NIH and other web pages, published research that has been pulled down, and there's been a freeze on new research being put out that has anything to do with any of that. And that even includes things like they're not sure if, for instance, if you did a general public health article and it tabulated things like gender responses, who responded to a survey, whether or not that could even be published now. So it's very broad ranging and very scary and very bad for public health, for just basically for everything. So while scraping and archiving efforts were initiated by researchers to preserve information, significant resources like the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System and the CDC's HIV risk reduction tool have disappeared. The reproductive rights website, reproductiverights.gov, went offline. Sections from the FDA on minority health faced removal. President Trump endorsed the moves, suggesting that the elimination of DEI policies was fine. Over 8,000 web pages encompassing data from agencies like the Census Bureau and the DOJ are affected, and the executive orders aim to retract federal endorsement of perceived, quote, gender ideology. And what that means is even the concept of gender and redefining sex as strictly male and female. They have made very clear in the executive orders that gender is not a term that the federal government will use anymore. They will only use the term sex. Gender is not to be used. And sex means male and female, biological at birth. So anything that does not hew to that is not to be published, is not to be mentioned, is not to be on the site. And if you do, and this includes things like if you have pronouns in your government email signature, that they are on it. And they've literally, there are numerous agencies that have told people to take pronouns out of your signature block if you are a government employee.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. It's been a week. This is literally, and again, this is like this week. Like we're not doing like a broad survey. We're literally talking about like this week's news stories. So like, buckle up, Buttercup. We are really in it. And, the hits just keep on coming. One of the things that really was, to me, one of the most disgusting ones. It's all been disgusting, but this one was really, really disgusting. To politicize a tragedy is in a troubling twist following last Wednesday's deadly DC airplane crash with a helicopter. Conservative circles quickly placed blames on marginalized groups. That included there might have been maybe like a black person in the air traffic control tower, or maybe a woman in the cockpit. Despite zero involvement, Joe Ellis, a transgender helicopter pilot, was mistakenly targeted in the wake of the accident between American Eagle Flight 5342 and a Black Hawk helicopter. With no survivors among the 60 passengers, internet rumors falsely claimed that Joe Ellis was flying the helicopter. despite confirmed pilots being Ryan O'Hara and Andrew Eves, famously non-transgender male names.
Joe Ellis had to go online and post a video proving that they were still alive.
Yeah. And the misleading narrative went viral, exacerbated by right-wing claims that diversity hires were responsible for this crash. The current president fueled this rhetoric, attributing the crash to former President Biden's hiring decisions during a press conference devoid of evidence and I would say full of lies, actually. Trump had earlier signed an order barring transgender individuals from military service, intensifying the bias. Ellis refuted the allegations and took to social media urging followers to dismantle the misinformation, stressing respect for victims and families over baseless internet narratives. Meanwhile, criticism mounts over staffing setbacks within aviation safety under Trump's administration. They have disbanded several panels within the FAA. They've sent letters, I think Elon Musk's behalf, to most of the air traffic controllers asking them to resign and go into and seek careers in the private sector. I know that there's at least one air traffic control tower on the approach to San Francisco to SFO that the new FAA renegotiated or connected with a new vendor that slashed their salaries at that air traffic control tower, and they all quit. So there is at least one air traffic control tower on an approach to a very important international airport that I believe as of this week doesn't have anyone working at it.
I have to tell you, you and I both have traveled a fair bit. I would not consider myself a frequent traveler any longer, but I have been throughout my life. I've logged probably 2.5 million miles at this point. I don't really feel comfortable flying anywhere for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the next 4 years. Like, I'm serious.
No, I hear you.
I just, I could see Elon turning this whole thing over to being done by AI and having a computer talk with people in cockpits, and no way.
Or just again, taking something that, there's a really good book, Tony Jute's Ill Fares the Land, which is about Britain and Britain's sort of under Thatcher, basically dismantling a lot of the sort of public goods, things like the trains and all of that, and just sort of taking apart what was a very robust idea of what the public good is. And why you have a public good. It's a beautifully written book. And while it's about Britain, it's very translatable here. And it's about why profit motives don't make sense for public goods. For instance, the federal airspace. We want to have a safe federal airspace, not to make money, and whether it pays for itself or not, there's a good. And the good is that people don't die and that people feel safe. And that actually ultimately benefits the private good, which is to say people feel comfortable to fly. And you have strictly a mindset that privatization is everything. And you literally sell off the federal airspace to the lowest bidder, who is going to have the fewest possible people at have the lowest wages and the lowest bar that is set. And if you have an FAA that is gutted, there's probably no bar. You can just hire someone straight off the street to be an air traffic controller for minimum wage. That is going to lead to deaths and is going to lead to a lack of security to fly. And that is going to hurt a huge industry. But they're not thinking about that. They don't actually care because they're so ideologically minded about privatization and about, like you said, robots. I mean, I'm sure, like you said, Elon Musk probably would think you can put a Tesla robot up in that traffic control tower, and it's going to be better than a human because it can process 30 trillion gigaflops or whatever. It's in the meantime, what we're doing is we're leading to a place where, I've spoken to several people who work in the industry who are flight attendants, and they and their cohort are increasingly worried to go to work because of what is happening with the FAA and with this administration.
Unbelievable.
And yet they blame it on women and people of color and trans people who weren't even on the helicopter. We want to end this on a good note. You know, we've covered a lot of stuff that's pretty heavy, and I'm not going to promise you that we're over with the heavy stuff on this show. Newsday Tuesday is going to be
not anywhere near it. I'm afraid.
Yeah, we're going to cover what we need to cover on Newsday Tuesdays. And, you know, sometimes we might even have to do, you know, substantial Saturdays and do more because a lot's happening. But in the meantime, we've got some great interviews lined up for Saturdays, and we will try to get some positive, uplifting things on Saturdays. We'll try to get some interesting interviews with folks.
And speaking of Florida, by the way, we're going to talk with a young man who is in a nonprofit organization where he will be termed out of his job because he will be turning 25 before long. It is a youth queer organization that is really involved in some important things in the Sunshine State. And I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation with him coming up on Saturday.
Absolutely. But we want to end on a good note. And so we have a good note for you, which is in a landmark move, Thailand has made hormone replacement therapy free, and that's shortly after legalizing marriage equality. The government's public health ministry allocated nearly 146 million baht to cover HRT for approximately 200,000 transgender citizens, reflecting growing acceptance of diverse gender identities. The allocation is intended to support both the physical and mental health of the transgender community, essential as many previously faced financial barriers to proper healthcare. A deputy government spokesperson, Anukul Pruksanusak, has emphasized that free HRT is vital for transgender individuals' health, reducing risks associated with unsupervised hormone use. Thailand still faces challenges in fully siding with transgender rights, as changing one's gender on official documents is unattainable right now, even amid the broader societal strides. Transgender advocates are urging renewed focus on legal gender recognition, seeing recent reforms as a stepping stone. Despite significant advances, experts assert more work is needed for complete inclusion and non-discrimination in Thai society. I will say they are doing great, and given the backward steps that we are taking, they are on the right path, and we are not, because we have seen stories in the past week or so of folks who have tried to renew passports, U.S. passports, who have X markers on their documentation and have had their documents, their sort of underlying documentation seized from passport agents. And this is going to be an ongoing battle here. I mean, you know, technically, many states and previously the federal government did allow for non-binary, indicators on things like passports and driver's licenses and birth certificates and all these things. We're seeing that being rolled back at breathtaking speed from the federal government, and there will be a knock-on effect with states, and they won't all make sense with each other. Again, you might be in California, which allows you to have an X on your birth certificate and on your driver's license. And when you go to use all those documents to get a passport, they will not accept them, or they will be confused, and they will issue you a passport based on your biological sex at birth, irrespective of what your documents say from your state. So I say, Thailand, go for it. Keep going, because we are going in the wrong direction here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. If you want to get in touch with us, you can write and tell us exactly what you think of all these stories or people involved in them. We welcome your feedback. info@richieandjohn, that's info@RICHIEANDJOHN.com is our email. Our website, where there is a feedback form, is richieandjohn.com, and our telephone number is 878-768-8825. And as always, we appreciate you being along with us, and we'll be back with definitely a lot of heart-pounding conversation in the weeks and months ahead.
Definitely.
And by the way, there's going to be a lot of action in the streets, I think, over the next several months. Get involved. Get involved.
Absolutely.
Be out there, be loud, be sure to stand up for those who can't necessarily stand up for themselves. If you can, it's going to take a village here, folks, to get this thing back on track.
Absolutely. We will be out there, and we will keep you posted. And until Saturday, I hope you have a good week, all things considered, and we will talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us on Richie and John. This podcast is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System and is available at richieandjohn.com, as well as most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.